And I was wondering why nobody makes electric cars that are exciting. So I wanted to do that with my BMW, where I blew the engine up, to show that electric cars can be fun and exciting, and that, you know, in the future, when someday combustion engines won't be around anymore, that there's still space for enthusiasts to enjoy their cars. And that's, I think, what's special about the Nevera. Even people who don't like electric cars, when they try the Nevera, they're like, wow, this car was built by proper car guys. And I believe that cars are kind of the culmination of all the human disciplines. On one side, art, because they have to be beautiful, but not just in terms of looking at them, but also, you know, the way it feels when you touch a button, the way it feels when you open a door, the way it sounds when you close the door, the way it smells in the car. You know, it's like a lot of sensory experiences, but then also all of the sciences, like material science and aerodynamics and composites and software and electronics. Everything is in the car. Everything humanity is doing is in the car, and it's an arms race between so many smart people in the world, so many manufacturers.
It's really evil. I said to him over the radio, oh no, Phil, you know what's going to happen next? I'm going to crash. It's going to be a disaster. It's your fault. Oh God. Set off, and not 5 minutes later, all he saw was a plume of black smoke and an air ambulance helicopter coming in to get me. Yeah, that was me being an idiot, because the car's really fast, and I'd crossed the finish line, but I kept my foot in just a couple of seconds too long. We're not getting the full story. Yes, electric vehicles have a part to play, of course they do, but I don't think it can be 100% electric for a very long time. But there's plenty of options that we never hear about. There's 1.6 billion cars currently on the road, all of which can run on synthetic fuels.
I was just a car guy, like I guess so many of the listeners here, from basically when I was born. And there was really no precondition to it, because I was born in an area where there were basically no cars. So at that time was still Yugoslavia in 1988. And where I'm from, what's today Bosnia. So Bosnia is basically the second poorest country in Europe. And where I'm from is the poorest part of Bosnia. So there were almost no roads, almost no cars, and my parents had nothing to do with cars. But somehow I was really obsessed with cars since before I could walk or talk. And I wanted to do something with cars all my life, whether being a race car driver, Formula 1 driver, designer, engineer. I cycled through all of it, and I tried to absorb everything like a sponge, what's about cars. And one of the lucky things that happened was that we moved to Germany, because the war started in Yugoslavia at that time. So my parents moved to Germany, and there were a bunch of cars, and they had a car culture, like lots of magazines, TV shows. I was watching all of them and tried to learn as much as I could. 10 years later, when I was 12 years old, we moved back to Croatia. But that stuck with me, and then when I was 18 years old, I bought a 1984 BMW that eventually blew up the engine, and I converted it to an electric car and so on. So I just wanted to do something with cars, anything. And I was a huge BMW fan. Like my big dream was to work for BMW one day. And I'm lucky today that what I'm doing is much more exciting than just being an engineer for BMW. By the way, we also work now with BMW and many other brands. But why I decided to do exactly this is because in Croatia, so over 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla was born. He invented the electric motor that we are using everywhere today. And being a Croatian, I read a lot about him and his motor. And at that time, so in 2008, 2009, electric cars weren't the thing. And I was wondering why nobody makes electric cars that are exciting. So I wanted to do that with my BMW, where I blew the engine up, to show that electric cars can be fun and exciting, and that, in the future, when someday combustion engines won't be around anymore, that there's still space for enthusiasts to enjoy their cars. And that's, I think, what's special about the Nevera. Even people who don't like electric cars, when they try the Nevera, they're like, wow, this car was built by proper car guys. Like, this is fun.
Right, yeah.
And it's exciting. Like Chris Harris, he's not really a huge fan of electric cars, but he loved the Nevera and he was blown away by it. But for me, it's not just about electric. So that's, let's say, one part of my journey where I did the craziest things with electric cars you could do. Like, now it's accepted that electric cars are fast and all of that stuff. But 15 years ago, when I started, would have been impossible to imagine an electric car will be faster than the fastest combustion cars, fastest hybrids, whatever. And that's actually what the Nevera is. It's the fastest accelerating car ever built. And but I'm not religious about electric. So now, you know, Bugatti is also part of the story, and you will see it in a few months, the success of the Chiron, which is, you know, from the last bolt, from the first to the last bolt was, you know, I've led that project, and was really, again, an idea in this head, and you will see it has a very interesting combustion engine, very big one. So I'm just about doing cool stuff for with cars, not because of a particular, let's say, technology or whatever, just because I think in the end, like, you know, I'm an optimist, and I believe that cars are kind of the culmination of all the human disciplines. On one side, art, because they have to be beautiful, but not just in terms of looking at them, but also, you know, the way it feels when you touch a button, the way it feels when you open a door, the way it sounds when you close the door, the way it smells in the car. You know, it's like a lot of sensory experiences, but then also all of the sciences like material science and aerodynamics and composites and software and electronics. Everything is in the car. Everything humanity is doing is in the car, and it's an arms race between so many smart people in the world, so many manufacturers. So I think that's why I got excited about cars initially as a kid. And I kind of feel if we push in the right direction and do cool and exciting stuff, and people get the opportunity to understand the people behind them, that new generations would be excited about it as well.
Let's go back to that 18-year-old, though, that was the BMW engineer. Where does the big break come from? How do you go from that kind of role that you would take to where we sit today?
Well, there's no like single big moment. It's just 15 years of like ups and downs. And I mean, our story of like the chance of me starting a car company in Croatia, where there was zero auto industry before, at least, I mean, there are some small suppliers, but no
Right.
really car industry, or it was one of the least developed, if not the least developed European countries when it comes to automotive industry. There was no investors, no talent, no market, no government support. So, and I didn't know one single person in the auto industry. I didn't know anybody. So the chances of getting here were like 0.00, and it was an incredibly difficult journey. Like I could tell you so many near-death experiences for the company that I'm really brand-marked by it, and kind of like I have PTSD from it. But you know, maybe the biggest, I would say, reason for it to happen was when the engine of the BMW originally blew up. I actually wanted to put in another combustion engine, like V8 from a E39 M5 at that time. But first of all, it was too expensive for me. But second, I was like, this will take a lot of my time and a lot of effort, and it's going to be difficult. So when I'm already doing it, why not do something that could also turn out into a business? So I thought at the time, and I was following Tesla. Mm-hmm. So Tesla just started. It was like totally under the radar. Nobody really knew about it. Elon Musk was not on the radar. It was Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning who were the original two founders. And I was following it, and I was like, this could go somewhere. And I followed the scene of people who were converting their cars to electric in the US and racing them. So there was a small community of people like DIYers who were doing this kind of stuff. And I thought, when I'm already doing this, okay, I want performance and I want to do something cool, but let's do something that can turn into a business. And actually my first company that I founded at that time was built to convert combustion engine cars to electric. Quickly I realized that that's a bad business, both technically and financially, and then I decided to build my own car and so on. But I think that was really the key, where I was like, okay, I'm going to do something that's going to take a lot of effort from me, a lot of time. So let's do something that could also be a business and not just a hobby. And yeah, it took from there.
How did you assemble the team that ultimately led to where we are today?
Well, so...
Because as you said, you're coming from an area where it's not really automotive centric.
Yeah, when I was like, okay, I want to build my own car. And I was just, self-taught in a garage. I was actually like, when I started with this, I was just finishing high school and started university. And I went to the University of Mechanical Engineering in Zagreb, which is like the closest to something automotive in Croatia. Or it's called actually of Mechanical Engineering and Naval engineering, so like boats, because Croatia had a boating industry. Like after the war, that fell apart as well. But I told them, look guys, I want to build a car in Croatia. I want to build an electric supercar. And they told me, it's impossible to build a car in Croatia. The sooner you give up, the less people will go under with you. And I was like, okay, that's very encouraging. So, but you know, being, I think, you know, determination, like doing your own thing and not listening to naysayers is something that's very important if you want to do something like this. So I actually knew a couple of guys that were good with their hands and did stuff, not in automotive industry, but for example, my first colleague, I wouldn't even call him an employee, like the guy who was working with me in the garage, Igor, he was a great self-taught engineer and manufacturing guy, because during the war in Croatia had an embargo on weapons. They couldn't buy weapons. So he was responsible in the army to develop and make drones and operate them. So he had to develop and make drones in Croatia without any, you know, real infrastructure for it, without the know-how. A similar story, right? So he was super skilled. And then another guy was a corporate guy, but in his free time he was building electric bicycles in his garage. And then a third guy, he was building race cars. So these were like the initial people, like super enthusiastic, you know, non-corporate, but zero experience from the auto industry. So we were just like building the company on, how would I say, people who had no idea about this, but were just thinking, let's say, common sense. But there's only so far you can get with common sense. So at the beginning I couldn't afford to hire foreigners, like, I don't know, like an Italian from Ferrari or some Germans who worked in the German auto industry. I just couldn't afford any of that. So it took years for us until we were financially stable enough and I had the first investors on board and so on, until we could hire the experienced ones. But oftentimes those with impressive CVs turned out to be nowhere near as good as just these guys who loved to do. You know, we were always having this inferior complex. Like, first of all, like us Croatians, we are not nearly as good as Germans or whatever. That was false. And you know, then thinking like we are far inferior just because we have never worked in the auto industry. Okay, yes, that's also a problem because you only learn in your own mistakes, which is the worst way of learning. But you make up for it in, you know, just enthusiasm and curiosity and unconventional solutions. But it helps to have the experience. So now we have a lot of people from the auto industry, from all possible manufacturers, which is good. How many
employees do you have now?
2,500.
Wow.
Wow. 2,500.
So you go from the garage to 2,500.
Yeah, in 15 years, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is somebody like Christian van Koenigsegg, who's been on this program, is he an inspiration? Because it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's coming from Sweden and wanting to build hypercars and wanting to do something different and starting with two hands.
Yeah. Well, actually, Horacio Pagani and Christian Koenigsegg are my big heroes, together with Nikola Tesla. And I'm lucky, you know, that I know both of them very well now. I would even consider them friends. With Koenigsegg, we worked also a lot. The Regera had our battery. That was one of our first bigger projects that we did. Let's say first for a serious production car, even though very small volume. And that was actually really the inspiration. Like when I was doing the BMW, I was like, this doesn't make sense. And you know, I had a few customers where I converted their cars to electric, and I realized like that really doesn't make sense technically and commercially. So it only makes sense to really develop a car from scratch that's going to be designed around the idea of electric propulsion, so 4 motors, batteries in the floor and all that stuff. And I knew that there were two guys who did it, Horacio and Christian. And actually, you know, I tried to read everything about them. You know, that's a huge advantage of stuff like this today. Like, you didn't have this information back then. I mean, the world changed so much. It's difficult to think back, like how different the world was just 15 years ago. Like, you know, now you have like this shows and podcasts of Horacio and Christian and me and people like us, and you can learn a bit about them. But I know I wanted to meet Christian, and I went to the Geneva Auto Show without knowing how he looks like. And I was going to the most senior looking guy at the Koenigsegg stand, and it was actually his father, Jesko. And he was such a nice guy. He listened to this, you know, kid. I mean, I was like, I don't know, 18, 19, but I looked even a lot younger, you know. So, you know, this kid who wants to build his own car. So he listened to me and he gave me Christian's email. Then I wrote everything to Christian. I still have these emails today. Actually, I must say, looking back at it now, it incredibly looked quite professional what I wrote to Christian, and that got him, you know, interested. Then when I actually had the first employees, I took the whole company. I remember, like, I had a Volkswagen Passat, and we all jumped in the car and we went for a factory tour in Pagani, in Modena, and that was a huge thing for me. Like, Pagani at that time was like 40 employees, and I was like, man, if we could be one day like Pagani, like that would be amazing. Like, but that seems so far-fetched. Yeah, now we are.
You feel that you're closer now, a lot closer?
Well, you know, today we are 2,500 employees. Pagani is like 200.
Right.
Not that like number of employees really equals.
But even in terms
success.
of stature, I mean, you've grown this. You've developed now a culture for a vehicle, right? The proof is in the product.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody's. Like, you know, I don't consider anybody competition. I really consider everybody an industry friends. We are super open. Like, everybody can come to us and see everything we do. And believe me, both Christian and Horacio are multiple times also there, and everybody else in the industry basically. So I'm very happy to collaborate with anyone. And you know, Horacio has positioned Pagani so uniquely. It's basically art. He's not in this arms race of technology and performance. The cars are good and they are performing well, but it's more about the artistic side, while Koenigsegg is all about crazy ideas and making them happen. So the Rimac is a bit like that, but now with, let's say, Bugatti, I also have a second canvas to draw on, which is a bit differently positioned than the two others.
How did the partnership come about that you would become involved with Bugatti and that you would now have the Volkswagen Group by your side?
So as I was building the business, initially, like, I couldn't get any investors. So that was the most difficult thing. Like, there were no investors in Croatia, and foreign investors, they didn't want to invest in electric cars, first of all, because at that time they already burned their fingers with like Fisker and a bunch of others that went bankrupt. And when they heard Croatia, like, what? They never thought about investing in Croatia. And then third, there was like just a 20-year-old guy with a few other like 20-year-olds in his garage. But as we were proving ourselves, we started to work for other car companies, we started to get business, we started to get revenue, and we were basically self-funding, but just barely surviving, like always being late with paying the rent and suppliers and stuff like that. It was really a struggle. But then, you know, some investors joined us, and one of the first was Porsche. So they invested in 2018, which was the first time that they ever invested in a company, and that was a huge deal for us. So in the whole journey of the 15 years, that was one of the biggest, if not the biggest single events that, you know, got us where we are today, where it was basically seal of approval. Then everybody was like, okay, if Porsche invested in these guys, they are something special, they know what they're doing. And Porsche actually invested 5 times in total in our company. So over the years, they invested more and more as we were working closer and closer together. And then at some point, you know, the Volkswagen Group had a lot of change. So Ferdinand Piech, who was the long-term patriarch of Volkswagen, he was not there anymore, then he passed away. And then there was Dieselgate, and Volkswagen Group was going all the way, with Herbert Diess especially, into electrification 100%. And Bugatti just didn't fit into that picture. First of all, electrification, like, how are they going to do it? And second of all, in such a gigantic group like the Volkswagen Group, which actually, if you think about it, has 4 times more revenues than Croatia's GDP. So a single company has 4 times more revenues than Croatia, and all of Croatia's GDP. All of the 5 or 4 million inhabitants of Croatia. And so they were not sure what's the future for Bugatti and how they can lead it to the next stage. And they were thinking about multiple options. And somebody had the idea, well, there's this guy in Croatia who's already building electric sports cars, because they actually thought that the next Bugatti has to be electric, which I strongly disagreed with, actually. And you will see that the next one will not be fully electric, it will be a hybrid car. And they were like, okay, we have already a relationship with these guys through Porsche. So it was an interesting idea to explore. What I then learned in such a huge company is that there was no opinion of the company. There was many opinions of many different people. And not many agreed with that idea of bringing us together. That's the right thing to do. But in the end, it turned out to be an absolute win-win for all sides. So it was a win for Bugatti, a win for Rimac, a win for Porsche, a win for Volkswagen, for the employees. It works beautifully.
It was always my passion. I mean, yeah, the car industry is in my blood. My grandfather was a coach builder. He apprenticed as a cabinet maker, went into the car industry, so naturally he was building the wooden frames. So he was very familiar with ash. Working at Mulliners in Birmingham. That's not the one that made all the posh Bentleys and things. They're the ones who made all those terrible Triumphs and things. But nevertheless, car industry was in the family. I always wanted to do it. Drifted into broadcasting, having come out of art college, and I went straight into radio. That's how good a painter I was. And after working in radio for, I don't know, 5-6 years, all I wanted to do was car shows. That was it. I'd spent everything I had on cars and motorcycles, which wasn't a lot, but it had all gone. And I'd run out of money to the point where I went to the supermarket, big store, in the village where I was living with my cards to pay for my shopping for that week. And my overdraft was full. I couldn't borrow any more money. My credit card was full. That was it. And now I starve. So I had to go back to my little rented apartment, and I kept my motorcycle, a GSXR 750. Does anybody know bikes? Okay, so GSXR 750, lovely bike. I got it on a loan, and I kept it in the shed behind the pub opposite. So I walked in, opened the shed door, and then my bike, it had like double headlamps, and it was hiding in a corner at the back like that. No, not me, please. So I had to ride the bike to the town where I'd bought it and hawk it around all the dealers, and whichever would give me the most cash. Took the cash and then walked home. It was raining. I was really glad because I was wearing all my butch bike gear, but crying like a 6-year-old girl all the way home. So I realized I'm not going to make it in radio, I'm going to starve to death. So I actually got a job, applied for and got a job at Renault UK in the press office, working for a legend, motor industry legend called Tim Jackson. Met a few people already today who knew him. He was one of the nicest men in the industry globally. But I got the job with a view to meeting the editors and the people in charge of all the car shows. And it worked. After 18 months, I went back into TV, finally doing car shows. So yeah, it only took me 36 years.
Well, how appropriate to have you back here then?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, we've always had great fun filming here, and the key thing you say about the car part of it, the shows that I did with the other two idiots. Well, they're not here, are they? We always used to say you don't have to be a car nerd to watch the show, because it had a massive audience beyond car guys. But you don't have to be a car nerd to watch it, because we do that for you. It was absolutely at the heart of everything we did. Our passion for cars, whether or not we were doing, if I'm sitting on top of Wolf Mountain waiting to be rescued by the other two who are pretending to be really late and I'm pretending to be cross, it doesn't matter. Everything was still informed and driven by our passion for cars.
What's the influence of Top Gear as you look back on it now?
I'm looking for a good influence? Good influence on who? How do you mean? What influenced it?
Or the influence on society, car culture.
On car culture, I think it perhaps broadened it. It brought more people into it. But make no bones, when we started it, all we wanted to do was make the best car show we could. I remember the first conversations with the BBC, Auntie Beeb as we call her, in the offices in London, way back in 2000, when we were just getting it in shape, ready to launch it. And I remember a very serious meeting when me, Jeremy, James, Andy Willman, and the production crew, we all sat around and we said, right, the rules of new Top Gear. It's real world, okay, so no supercars. And then we said, keep it for real journeys real people do, no travel to foreign places. We didn't stick by those rules. We fairly quickly realized that cars cars matter to us all because anything that you need beyond the comfort of your cave, we only need so many things, don't we? Shelter, then food, warmth, company, a mate, supplies. Everything beyond shelter, beyond your cave, you need to go out and get. So humanity was always going to invent a machine that enabled you to go and get it more quickly. And if it enables you to get it before the bloke or woman in the cave next door, it's even better. So it's the most important thing we've ever created. So we quickly realized, hang on, you don't have to be a car nerd to be touched by that. Cars move us physically, and therefore they move us emotionally. So whether or not we define ourselves as car enthusiasts, we all have an enthusiasm, a passion for a machine that moves us in order to conduct our lives. They've shaped our world.
Describe the evolution of that show. How did it transform?
Well, a big fat man interviewed me, and I got the job. We were all long-term motoring journalists. We'd written about cars and broadcast about cars for years. Top Gear had been rested, and then it was brought back by us guys. And honestly, there was no science in it. We're not clever enough to work out, hey, if we do this, it'll be really big in Australia, and if we do that, it'll be big in America and Canada and Russia. We didn't know. We just did the best show we could, but we were beneficiaries of the times. People wanted, it was a genuine show. It was authentic. It was never disingenuous, but it was irreverent, and people wanted that. We were just lucky. Just did it at right time, right place. Sorry, no science to it. We didn't know what the hell we were doing.
It was scary too at times. A couple of dates that I'm sure are stamped in your brain. September 20th, 2006.
No, forgotten, oddly enough. Yes.
Well, you probably didn't forget going 463 kilometers an hour or 288 miles an hour.
No, it was 320 miles an hour, actually. They always print 288. It was 320 miles.
The record's been set straight.
It would have been.
In the Vampire.
It would have been a British land speed record if I'd gone the other way, but I didn't. Yeah, that came about because I went into the office once and just said to Andy Willman, the boss, hey, Andy, I just want to go real fucking fast. That's it. And so we set about looking for an opportunity to do that. And in fact, I'd already booked in an appointment with my insurers to go and get new life insurance, which required a face-to-face meeting because of my job. And Andy Willman, the boss, said, no, mate, sorry, you can't go on that day. I'll need you to drive this Vampire. Just so I crashed it with no insurance. But yeah, it was...
a jet-powered car.
It was a jet-powered dragster. And it was the final run of the day. I'd been driving it all day. They'd blanked off the speedometer, so I didn't know how fast I was going because they didn't want me chasing speeds, because that's when things go wrong. And we'd actually finished for the day. But the director said, Rich, I've got permission for one more run. Carry on. So I did it, and on that final run, obviously gave it everything. And it is that because it's a jet engine.
Right tire blew, right?
The right front tire delaminated and blew at 320. It slewed to the right. When I came to in the hospital weeks later, really, the thing that most mattered was, had I done the right thing? And telemetry said, yes, I had. I'd pulled the chute, but the chute hadn't stopped it, and by then the car twisted, and then it was going upside down.
And you turned into it, didn't you?
Yeah, turned onto the right.
Right.
Went off across the fields, and then it started to roll, and I was still doing just shy of 300, and there was no roof. So I just thought, oh, that's that. Coming genuinely, and it wasn't scary. It was genuinely, it was no more than, I guess, sorry, this is morbid. We'll talk about funny stuff in a minute. I'll joke about how fat Jeremy is or something, because he is. But in the meantime, yeah, we all kind of wonder, don't we, sometimes? Yeah. How's it going to be? When's it going to be? And to me, in that moment, I thought, oh, it's now. Nothing more than that. Next thing to do on my job list was die. But I didn't.
And the next one, the one that really
the Rimac
that really got people excited.
Yeah.
June 10th of 17, right?
Yeah, that was, we're on a Swiss hill climb event, and I'd taken the Rimac Concept 1, Mate, who you met today. What a genius. And there were only 8 in the world. And by the time I'd finished, there were only 7.
My favorite moment of this is that the only thing that you remembered was sky ground, sky ground, sky ground, sky ground.
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, we'd been doing runs up the hill all day, and weirdly, this is terrible, same director as the Vampire Crash.
Oh.
Came over the radio. James and I were on our way back down the hill after our final run of the day. He came over the radio, lads, I've got permission for one more run. And I said, this is really evil. I said to him over the radio, oh no, Phil, you know what's going to happen next? I'm going to crash. It's going to be a disaster. It's your fault. Oh God. Set off, and not 5 minutes later, all he saw was a plume of black smoke and an air ambulance helicopter coming in to get me. Yeah, that was me being an idiot, because the car's really fast, and I'd crossed the finish line, but I kept my foot in just a couple of seconds too long, and there was a left at the top with a bit of sand on it, and the car rotated, and I went off backwards, and it end-over-ended multiple times. I think it fell about 500 feet, end over end over end, went between a tree and a house. I posted it with absolute precision. It was upside down in the air for quite a long time. I was thinking snacks might come round or something, because it was, then I realized I'm going to have to land, and eventually it did, upside down. I was wearing a seatbelt, not a full harness, and a helmet, but no neck brace. But I was okay dangling from the seatbelt. I knew my legs broken and my ribs, and I thought, yeah, I better get out. Started struggling to get out, and then I thought, no, somebody will come and get me. I mean, they will have noticed that. And then I heard the fire start, and I thought, oh, I really should get out. And I mean, all credit to Mate and the Rimac, the door opened after what the car had been through was incredible. I pulled myself out, and a couple of people arrived, and I said, don't pull me by my legs, they're broken, pull me by my arms, and they did. And then they put me on the stretcher waiting to get into the air ambulance. And I thought, I'm going to have to telephone my wife. This is going to be a tricky telephone call. But I thought it's going to come out on social media. So I said, I need a telephone. And eventually one of the medics gave me a telephone, and I rang her. Hi, Mind. Hi, how you doing? Yeah, fine. Car blazing away over there. Ambulance, helicopter there. Yeah, fine. Look, I've had a bit of a shunt. You're probably going to see it on social media soon, but don't worry, I've run checks, and I'd gone through saying to them, the medics must have thought I was mad, because I was saying, right, I'm Richard Hammond, the date, this is the car I'm driving, my daughters are Izzy and Willow, my wife's Mindy, yep, everything works, my brain's okay. So I said, I've run checks, there's nothing that won't mend, legs and ribs and things, but it'll all fix. And she was all right about it. She wasn't pleased.
I thought she told you do this again and
3 strikes and I'm out.
Right.
But I got
which you might have been out anyway at 3 strikes.
Well, I got shipped off to the hospital, pumped full of morphine and a big cage around this leg. Swiss hospital, and they're quite good at mending broken things in Switzerland because everyone breaks them skiing. James May arrived in the hospital with a bottle of gin. I couldn't have been happier. I was having a great time. The director, meanwhile, was practically having a nervous breakdown. Poor Phil, genuinely, it really hurt him. Because of what I'd said before the run, I still feel bad about that. But yeah, Mindy came out eventually. She was cross, slightly crosser when she saw the unbelievably pretty Swiss nurse that had been looking after me. And I'd insisted on, I want to have it mended in Switzerland because they're really good. And I've since had a tattoo. I had it finished on Monday on this knee. It's now my Swiss Army knee. Remember the Swiss Army penknives? And it's got the little Swiss Army symbol on it? Because it's got all metal in it. Yeah, I know. It was just my parking. It's not my driving. I tend to park upside down and on fire.
Funny story.
But my driving's fine.
I asked Richard whether I could bring that story up in front of this crowd, and he said, you said what? Go ahead.
Well, you might as well. It's always there anyway. I mean, people do.
Well, every time you get into a taxi, somebody asks you about it.
Every single time, yeah. Well, of course they do.
Aren't you the guy that crashed?
It was rather public, yeah.
It was rather public, yeah.
Yeah, oops.
Well, you could have, taken Rimac down with you.
Yeah, I could, but yes, I did. Well, I did destroy one of their 8 cars.
Right.
So I think I should be employed as their test driver. I'm going to put it to Mate Rimac tomorrow.
When you think about
delivering automotive passion to the masses, which is what Top Gear effectively did. And it's what you're continuing to do. Besides you, who does it well these days?
I think there was a bit of a slump, certainly from the UK, because they tried to just emulate what we were doing, because Top Gear came to an end. Jeremy, if you heard, didn't punch a producer. I was there. But he was out of order. He threw a strop and they didn't renew his contract. I just want to get that straight, because I wouldn't work with somebody who went around slugging colleagues. I wouldn't mind slugging him sometimes, but I'd have to stand on a box, and that's undignified. So after we moved on to the Grand Tour on Amazon, they had various attempts. The problem was that they kept trying to just mirror what we did, but that show had grown up around us. It's like your favorite coat only fits you because it's evolved to fit you. That show did. I think it's important that people do, because there's no doubt about it. Two key things in my life undergoing massive change, in all our lives actually. Firstly, the car. Hello, we're all in the industry, and we can see it's undergoing huge change. Also broadcasting. Linear broadcasters are falling left, right and centre. It's all fracturing and changing. There's never been a more exciting time to talk about cars, nor a more important time, because every single person buying their next car is the biggest purchase next to your house, and it's the most significant buying decision you'll make in terms of your contribution to the future of the world. And I don't think we're not getting the full story. Yes, electric vehicles have a part to play, of course they do, but I don't think it can be 100% electric for a very long time. But there's plenty of options that we never hear about. There's 1.6 billion cars currently on the road, all of which can run on synthetic fuels. The German government recently pushed Europe into saying, oh, okay, you can carry on making internal combustion engines until 2035, but only if they can run on synthetic fuel. That's every car in production and every car ever made, without any changes to the current infrastructure. It can be distributed in the same tankers, the same gas stations, and used in the same cars without any modification, and has to be if we're going to achieve net zero. I was at a meeting with Martin, the very charismatic and unnecessarily young CEO of P1, one of the companies making fully synthetic fossil-free fuel. And he showed me a graph that said by 2050, by far, even if we could keep up the current take-up of electric, which we can't realistically because China withholding rare earth minerals, and also the problems of electricity generation and distribution, and also price. Even if we could, by 2050, by far, the majority of cars on the road will still be internal combustion engine. So we have to have synthetic fuel if we're going to achieve net zero. We have to make do amend to an extent. We have to keep some of the car fleet working in order to collectively achieve net zero. We will do it. Engineering will solve it. I hate to say it, capitalism will solve it. We will solve it. That's not to say we can afford to be lazy nor complacent, and neither should we. It's very important that we don't. We cannot take our foot off the gas. But we will do it.
Are you passionate about the coming wave of electric transportation?
Yeah.
Or does propulsion have little to do with passion?
I think what the car does and can do for us will always be exciting. We'll never lose our passion for it. It symbolizes something essentially human and important. And I'm not overstating it just for you on that. I firmly believe that. I think there's something desperately appealing about an internal combustion engine because it works in a way that we can recognize. There's a chemical reaction leading to energy. That's not to say I don't think people can be passionate about EVs. I think they can and will be. I think what companies like Rimac are doing, his isn't about a utilitarian alternative. It's saying this is exciting in and of itself, can be and shall be, and they will form part of the future. And the message, I'm sure, that we're not, the media is guilty of not putting across to us as consumers, all of us, is, wait a minute, the future isn't a bleak utilitarian landscape full of autonomous, anonymous boxes that you order from your smartphone. There will be those, and if you just go into the shops or to work, maybe that's the right application. but we're never going to lose our passion for these machines that move us physically and thereby move us emotionally because of what they do for us. I think, in fact, and I'm seeing it happen already in terms of media and at car shows, more and more people, when faced with the prospect of that sort of polarization into utilitarian purely, and that's part of what we must, the necessary decarbonisation of the transport infrastructure. There's a bag of syllables. That will form part of it, but also that's going to throw into contrast the other side of it. Wait a minute, I have an emotional connection with this machine that facilitates my life. My 20-year-old daughter has no interest in cars, but when we were talking about it, she said, "But I really like my old VW Polo." Oh, hang on, am I a car enthusiast? Yeah, I think more and more people will actually find themselves declaring themselves as car enthusiasts because they feel an emotional attachment, engagement for this machine that can do this for them. So I think the future is actually far brighter than it's being painted.
Yeah, true enough. What do you say to people who complain that today's generation doesn't care about cars?
I don't believe that, and I don't think it stands up. I think it's different. Of course it is, but so's music. Have you heard the crap they listen to? Good grief. Well, I mean, young, what are they really? So it's going to be expressed differently. Of course it is. As soon as my eldest daughter Izzy, as soon as she passed her driving test, 17, which is the age you can in the UK, she just took off. And the car initially for her symbolized freedom. It wasn't about the car, it was about what she could do with it and where she could go. Actually, she's now discovering a latent passion for the machine that facilitates all of those things, which I think more and more people will do. I think it'll be different, of course it will. I've just discovered in the UK, for instance, the kind of car, modding your own car. I thought that died out with my generation. I'm 54, and I thought we were the last generation to sort of cover your car in glue and drive it through an auto shop and stick bits to it. But actually it's massive and blossoming and booming. Social media is sharing vast amounts of content on it. People are spending fortunes modifying their precious rides. So it's still there, it's just different. The problem is if those running the industry, supplying them, lose contact with what they're doing and what they want, we're left with this bleak landscape, or the idea of one. But it isn't that. There's still a passion for it, and there always will be. Don't worry, we'll probably all still be in business 10 years from now. Probably.
Let's talk about your own collection. You've had some interesting rides through the years. I know one you want back, but do you still have the 29 Model A Ford?
Do you know, I don't. I did some trialing in it. I loved that car. It's another, I've regretted every car I've ever sold. I did some off-road trialing in it and I loved it. I love that straight four. It's a simple lump. It's also an early example of mass production. You can tell how it was engineered into it from the start. So no, I don't have it. I do have other vintage cars.
Oh, well, let's talk about your other vintage cars. What do you have?
Old stuff. Currently in the garage, I'm campaigning in the Exmoor trial with my daughter next week in a 1930 Austin 7 Ulster bodied. I've got a 1934 supercharged Lagonda low chassis Tourer with the throttle pedal in the middle and the brake on the right. And I let James May drive it once. Because obviously in a panic situation, you just hit the thing that makes everything worse. So I had a plaque engraved that sits on the dash. The brake is on the right. You need to know that. I've got a 1933 Riley Alpine Tourer. That's a lovely rare little car, little tiny straight six. So I love vintage stuff right up to modern day. Yeah.
You also have modern day stuff, right? Is it true that you have a Ram TRX?
I had that for a while.
Yeah.
I've just bought my full-on midlife crisis car.
Which is?
54 this year. I've always said I have a soft spot for Porsche because they work and you can just use it and abuse it. It's a car. And I've always said Porsches have to be rear-wheel drive only and a coupe. So I bought a Turbo S Cabriolet in black, and I drive it with the hood down and my shades on, and people actively laugh and point at the middle-aged man bringing my crisis out into the world. But you see, my reckoning is, the car makes me really happy. It makes you happy laughing at me. so it's bringing joy.
Win-win.
That's a good, I think it should be state subsidized. I'm bringing joy. I make a lot of people smile every day in that car.